context of white supremacy, Gus T. Renegade, and Justice in for another program, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of racism, white supremacy, move us a little closer to replacing white supremacy with justice. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Again, want to remind all the listeners, please join the Facebook group. Back of the Bus put a lot of effort into it. A lot of people have already joined, but more folks, you can join. You can leave comments on the shows that you've heard, make suggestions for people you'd like to hear on the program or any other things you would like to discuss relative to the show and racism, white supremacy. All you have to do, go to the show page on Blog Talk Radio, look for the link for Facebook, click it, join the group. That would be fantastic. Moving right ahead, our guests for today's program, plural, they put out a book. I first got this book in my hands. Dr. Eddie Moore Jr., he's been on the program, founder of the White Privilege Conference. He gave me a copy of the book just before he came on the show, and opened it up. I'd heard about it before, but I'd never seen it. I opened it up, and it was talking about Jamie Foxx being on the set for Miami Vice, and he kept finding these nooses that apparently people were leaving as some sort of prank. And I was stunned, just started looking through the book. As soon as I left Dr. Moore's office, was able to contact them, and they were gracious enough to share some of their time with us this evening. That book, the title, You Mean There's Race in My Movie? They also have a DVD by the same name. You can check out their website. Lots of constructive information. Pleasure to have them with us this evening, Mr. Frederick Gooding and Khalid Patterson. Mr. Patterson, Mr. Gooding, are you both there?
Good evening. Thank you for having us.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you. I guess, first of all, could you, each of you, tell us briefly a little bit about yourselves to help our listeners understand who you all are and why you all put this project together?
Certainly. Again, my name is Frederick Gooding, CEO of the Minority Reporter and co-founder. My colleague is Khalid Patterson. And together what we do as a Minority Reporter is we critically analyze race in mainstream movies. Essentially what we do is we travel all around the country, in fact, different parts of the world, wherever mainstream movies are shown, and we host substantive conversations about this quote-unquote difficult dialogue or this courageous conversation dealing with diversity in this post-racial society. I guess more on that later. But what we do is we really take the pressure off individuals. We really don't finger point. Every individual has their own unique perspective. We understand that and appreciate that, but what we do is we help focus the conversation on a common medium that we all know and love, and that is mainstream movies. I don't know if you knew, Mr. Jefferson, but there are actually 6 established patterns in mainstream movies. They are the archetypes. And I'd like Mr. Patterson to elaborate on those, but essentially what we do is we establish what those patterns are, and then using modern mainstream movies, we don't bore our audiences with the old school black and white footage. However salacious that material may be, we try to stay current as far as 1990 and up until today. And what's interesting is that you look at mainstream movies today, a lot of us audience members believe that, hey, I mean, we're pretty much immune from these horrific patterns of old. There's nothing wrong. We have the Will Smiths of the world. We have the Eva Mendez's of the world participating in the mainstream space, but yet there still is a pattern. We highlight that pattern, then show concrete examples, and then that's what allows us to really dig deeper as to how these relationships and these patterns affect us, not only on screen as far as image creation, but also off screen. So, Mr. Patterson, what would be some of those archetypes that we talk about?
Well, there are 6 archetypes. I am Khalid Patterson again, co-founder of the Minority Reporter. And these 6 archetypes actually stem from the harm theory. And the harm theory is Hollywood's acting rule for minorities that states that if and when you see a minority or non-white character in a mainstream movie, they are likely to be marginalized in some way, shape, or form. And these 6 archetypes form the basis of our argument when we analyze race in mainstream movie. And the 6 archetypes we'll really run through quickly before we dig into the conversation. Just to run down the 6 archetypes, they are angel figure, background figure, comic relief, menace to society, physical wonder, and utopic reversal. And as we go through the course of this conversation, we will likely refer back to those and continue to add definitions to them. And what is important for the listeners out there to understand about where we've come from is that our goal is to add structure to this conversation. In other words, instead of trading anecdotes, let's trade intellect, and let's elevate this emotional argument about race into one that takes on an intellectual plane. And then by sharing this common language, we will ultimately be able to further process this often emotional discussion.
Outstanding. I want to get my co-host to ask some questions. Before I go to her, I want to just clarify for our listeners. You are both non-white males, black males, is that correct?
That's what they tell us.
Although we do wear white lab coats.
True.
I'm sorry?
Although we do wear white lab coats.
Oh, I got you. This program, Context of White Supremacy, I have unfortunately concluded that we are in a global system of racism, white supremacy. The definition that I use for racism, white supremacy is a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they say is not white. Do the both of you gentlemen feel that such a system exists, and do you feel that definition is accurate?
I'm just wondering what you're eating for breakfast over there. That's hard hitting. It's a little tough. Are your listeners ready for that?
We're 30 shows in, and that's every show starts. So yeah,
so they better be ready.
That's coming. They know that's coming.
Frederick, I'm going to put that one on your plate.
Well,
see that he's gone silent.
No, I mean, that's the thing. I had to just recover the air knocked out of me on that one. That was pretty hard hitting. Well, the idea is that when you talk about a global approach, we believe that you are accurate in that a lot of what we talk about with respect to image creation is not just local. I mean, localized here, multiplex. In fact, I mean, because a lot of people ask us, well, hey, what's the big deal? It's just a movie, right? Well, I guess, but to some people, namely those in Hollywood, it's actually a multi-billion-dollar global industry. Mr. Jefferson, you might be curious to know that mainstream movies are the second largest export behind aircraft. And so therefore, what's interesting is that when you talk about this idea of hierarchy, right, and maybe pigmentocracy, the idea that, hey, those with lighter skin are afforded maybe more privilege as opposed to those with darker skin, and the nuances in between. Well, the idea is that many people across the world who have never had the opportunity to meet Mr. Jefferson in person, as articulate and handsome and as, you know, well respected as he is and what he does, they never have that opportunity to meet you, but before they would, they have this image or this perception of what someone like you would look and sound like based upon, I don't know, Big Mama's House 2 or you know, a Bad Boys 2 or Bad Boys 1 or even you know, something like Shrek, right? You know, with Donkey. The idea is that we see time after time different movies made by different studios featuring different producers, different people involved, but yet they all seem to fall in line with this pattern. So when you talk about this global approach, what's interesting is that indeed our analysis is not limited to the American borders, but it's actually a worldwide phenomenon whereby the image creation is fostered by a certain group of people, those who have the means to create these and make the investment into these movies. And unfortunately, what we end up is with this dynamic whereby many minorities end up paying the price of admission equally, right? Because Hollywood markets its movies to all citizens, I mean, to anyone who has the ability to pay. But minorities, based upon their consistent marginalization, right? We're not saying that they're not involved at all. We're just saying that they're consistently marginalized according to the harm theory. So the idea is that they pay the price of admission equally, but disproportionately bear the cost of omission.
Very interesting. If you all were white, I would be hammering a little harder because I'm not sure I got a clean answer to the question, but I'm going to pass to my co-host, Justice. She has been an all-star in for all 6 shows we've done in the last 5 days, and she's itching to ask questions, so I'm going to pass and let her ask some questions. She is 10, but she is a non-white person, and she's very informed about racism, white supremacy, and she is eager to learn more, particularly about films, which is you all's specialty. So, Justice, take it away.
Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Quite well. And please don't take it easy on us just because we're kind of old.
Okay. I have something to ask. Can everyone on the call try to speak at a vocabulary level I can understand? I'm 10 years old. Thank you.
Will do.
Can do.
Okay. And I have a question to ask. What movies have you made or watched that teaches you both about racism and white supremacy?
Well, I at the risk of getting hard hit here, which we implore you to, one of the words that we rarely use in our presentations is the R word because it's just so scary, and as Hollywood would tell you, they're not being racist, they're just making movies. Now, having said that, one of the things that we ask of our audience is to look critically not for a smoking gun memo that says, hey, I was out there to look minorities look bad, but to quite simply look at the images that were given. One of the movies that comes to mind, and you being 10 years old, might have come out just shortly after you were born, is Planet of the Apes. And this is a remake of an old classic that was partly based from a writer, from the mind of a writer named Rod Serling, who you may be familiar, even though you're 10, with The Twilight Zone and that series. And as it turns out, Rod Serling was actually very much interested in race and social justice and created this movie called The Planet of the Apes that was supposed to be this racial parable. Now, fast forward, because again, we're not going to talk about that old movie. We're going to talk about the new one. Flash forward to this movie made in 2001, and clearly anyone that watches this movie understands that the symbols and symbolism used in this movie pertains to the context of race. The movie opens with, and for those of you who don't know out there, this is a movie starring Mark Wahlberg, Marky Mark, and featuring Michael Clark Duncan. Mark Wahlberg is, again, a white male, ends up on this planet full of apes. And you see within this movie that despite the fact that the apes are played of varying races and ethnicities, that the hierarchy still remains in place. And in fact, the movie is laced with different symbolism such as, again, humans being enslaved and saying things like, phrases like human lover coming from the apes being directed towards the humans. Can't we all just get along? Fred, what are some of the other symbols that we see throughout this movie?
Well, in Planet of the Apes, what's interesting is that we happen to see apes in Ape City hanging out on the steps at the barbershop, smoking, and playing basketball, of all things. Now, obviously, these are things that anybody can do, but the question is, are they, in fact, speaking to symbols that we already know? Justice, did you see the movie Transformers 2 that came out this past summer?
No, but I have seen, well, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Well, in Transformers 2, I don't know if you remember, but there were two twin robots. Their names were Mudflap and Skids. Now, what's interesting is that when we talk about symbols, a lot of times, particularly with cartoon images or computer graphics, we don't necessarily see race on the surface. So, for example, we're talking about robots. But yet, Mudflap and Skids, when they transformed into their robot form from the cars, they actually had, one of them actually had a gold tooth. Now,
wait, yeah, what part does that transform from, a gold tooth?
Well, I didn't know robots had teeth. Or,
right.
I mean, what do they chew upon? I mean, I don't know, maybe you lose your first set after a certain amount of mileage and you get the second set in or something. But
right.
at any rate, the point is, Justice, that the gold tooth does not symbolize a Jewish lawyer or, an Irish architect. It symbolizes a black male gangster, and the idea is that, well, at least that's the implied reference, especially when you listen to how they talk on screen and the fact that, they're, beatboxing and behaving in a way that a quote-unquote gangster would. Now, again, the movie directors can say, listen, we're not doing anything wrong. We're just making a robot. It's not about race. But in actuality, it's very difficult for us to take that at face value when you talk about it takes months and millions of dollars to create this image. I mean, just like another example is, think about, Justice, did you see a B movie? It was an animated movie with
Yes.
Seinfeld.
Yes, I have watched the movie.
Well, what's interesting is now, it's animated movie, so it's all insects and bees and everything. So there's no race per se in that movie, or is there? So let me ask you this, Justice: do you recall? Do any of the characters? Do you know if they were voiced by non-whites?
Maybe
See, it's
that question again?
Do you remember if any of the characters were non-white characters? Because see, for the most part, the assumption is that all the bees are just normal, they're just regular, but in actuality, most of them are all voiced by white characters. And see, we don't think of them as being white characters, much like in Finding Nemo, we don't think of them as white characters. But in actuality, they are. They're voiced by white characters, except for there's this one non-bee, the annoying mosquito. I don't know if you remember. He just happened to be voiced by the comedian Chris Rock. And so it goes to show you that even though on its surface it may not look like that people are using race, in actuality they are. And race itself becomes a symbol to communicate a certain message. And in the B movie, if you remember, the mosquito was the annoying, blood-sucking parasite, in contrast to the hardworking, industrious bees who, if they did not work, the world would be a duller, drier place because we would be without the richness of their honey.
Wait, Frederick, it seems like, are you confusing that with Eddie Murphy as Donkey in Shrek?
You mean as in, do I have anything in my teeth? Donkey?
Right. Or are you referring to Chris Rock voicing the zebra
in Madagascar? Oh, I thought you were referencing the Rastafari jellyfish in Shark Tale.
Right. And then I thought you might be referencing, another animated character like a Jar Jar Binks in Star Wars. also voiced by a black actor.
Or I thought you were talking about the rhinoceros, who was voiced by Cedric the Entertainer in Ice Age.
And as you can see,
with the flared nostrils, the rhinoceros, you didn't see that one? And the big lips?
Right. Once again, fitting the same pattern of the big lips, teeth. Again, all the qualities that, when we're talking about mainstream movies, that we wouldn't want to embody. And again, we can't dismiss this overlap as complete coincidence or happenstance.
Yeah, and real quick, Justice, I mean, have you seen an animated movie that has starred a black girl such as yourself? Hello? Am I on air?
That may be, is that our answer?
Well, you see, it's a difficult question because I don't know if that movie has been made. And so sometimes we take for granted the fact that with especially these animated movies, even though they're for all children of all ages, they really only feature certain characters from certain races.
Right.
You know, and that's the issue. The idea is that I don't have a problem watching Finding Nemo or Cars or, you know, Monsters vs. Aliens. I enjoyed these movies. But my question is, you know, when I'm sitting down watching Polar Express, well, you know, when am I also going to see other movies that feature other children of other races who also get a chance to save the day? Now, again, I know you might be thinking, well, Polar Express, hold up there. There is a young black girl who is featured in that movie. And yes, you are correct. Although technically she's not the protagonist, you know, as far as the movie centering around her family life the way it does the young boy. And also what's interesting is that even though it's a movie made for kids and has that interesting computer graphic animation around the likeness of humans, they actually did not use a 10-year-old African-American child actor for that role. They actually used the 30-plus-year-old face of Nona Gay for that character.
To voice that character, correct.
Right, and also likeness for a face. So what's interesting is even in making a movie whereby we have participation of non-whites in this space, we're still not even being fully open with respect to opportunities for non-white actors to grow into the fold. So, Mr. Jefferson, you mentioned earlier that if we were white, you would actually hit us a little bit harder. Is now a good time to maybe revisit a couple other questions that you would like to pose to us?
I feel that we may just be getting white noise.
Wow.
Okay. We're back. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Some interference to be expected. This is not the first time we have encountered interference.
Hello?
Yes, we got you too, Justice. Sorry about that, gentlemen.
Perfect.
Well, Mr. Jefferson, if you see the conspiracy is alive and well.
Really. Careful. You can't mention too many of those buzzwords and expect your technology to be working.
Oh, we said this years ago when the cows first started, that if this show was even mildly constructive, we expected the white people who practice white supremacy would get involved to disrupt, and we have seen that repeatedly. So no big deal. Thank you all for hanging out. Justice, they were answering your question about films with racism. I was finding it very constructive. Continue, please, Justice.
Okay. How can the system of white supremacy be stopped?
Well, first of all, I think, Justice, I want to recognize you for even being where you are on the radio program. I think it's absolutely phenomenal and fascinating that your father has taken care to involve you in this conversation at such an early age. When I was 10 years old, I was busy doing other things, like playing Atari. I don't even know if you know what it is. But,
are you still doing that?
No comment. But the idea is, I really think that this is a start, Justice, by you taking these questions very seriously and thinking about them. After all, this idea of white supremacy and privilege and racial differentiation, it does affect you. I mean, you turn on the TV, and what we were asking during that little break there was, when was the last time you've seen someone in your likeness and image starring in a television show or in a mainstream movie, right? Let alone an animated movie, right? Or someone who looks like your father saving the day, being the hero at the end, right? These examples are few and far between, if they exist at all. And there's nothing wrong with seeing white heroes. I mean, I think that, we need white heroes just as we need heroes of any other race. But the idea is that the problem is we often talk about this idea of diversity from one side only. So only one group really who has the opportunity to determine what will be diverse enough. And so I think that by having someone like yourself at an early age involved in this conversation, talking to your friends, I think what will happen is you will start to make choices about, well, do I want to watch this television program? Will I ask, for money to pay for this movie when I don't feel that it's something that's supporting my image and who I am? And so I think that from an early age, making these consumer decisions will be important as you begin to grow and learn more about how the history of this country has impacted where you are today and what opportunities there are to, in fact, move forward. Because I think an obvious answer is, well, Justice, when you get older, you can make your own movies too. That's the easy answer, but in actuality, you're also going to need $150 million along with a great script. And so the idea is, okay, if you don't necessarily have that, or if you're working on that, I'm sure if you're in the radio now, you definitely have a savings account somewhere. The idea is, if you don't have that type of capital, if you don't have that type of access to materials and equipment, I think that by developing your intellectual capital, you will be making an investment into not only your future, but our future as well. Isn't that right, Mr. Patterson?
Well, what you've said, sir, and I'll add on or put in short terms, that the bottom line is that the system of marginalization that we have, in order to put it to an end, we have to stop it from being financially viable. And if you look at the history of the civil rights struggle, and justice is an appropriate name when we think about that, the civil rights era didn't come about as a result of some broad-scale change in morality that somehow people just started to wake up one day and just say, you know what, I do like everybody. I think that we should just change what we do. No, this is the result of things like boycotts, protests, things that otherwise prevented the systems that were in place from being financially viable as they were. And the same thing has to happen with mainstream movies if we expect them to change. Because right now, the systems of marginalization that we see are profitable, and as such, they won't change until they become less profitable.
I concur.
what we were asking before is both for Justice and yourself, Mr. Jefferson, is that I'm not sure if I want you to take off the white gloves or put the white gloves on, but please feel free to challenge us so that our listening audience can truly understand the depth of our analysis as well as how it pertains to the particular angle that you're bringing to the table as well.
We will be sure to do so. Justice, you have some more questions you want to ask?
Not right now.
No justice, no peace.
I will let you ponder for a second. I'll ask a few, and then I'll come right back to you. Mr. Patterson and Mr. Gooding, actually, Justice and I, we are auditioning to see if we could get you back for a second show because there is a white person, an admitted white supremacist who was on the program in May. His name is Dr. Martin Kevorkian. He is a professor at the University of Texas, Austin. He has written a book called Color Monitors, The Black Face of Technology in America. And he spends a lot of time talking about racism, white supremacy in films. And I think it would be very interesting to have you three on a program together talking about movies because he talks about some of the exact same films you all talk about. He talked about I, Robot extensively on our program, and you all talk about that film as well. You all have slightly different views, but you're both pointing out a lot of constructive things in the film. So if you think this is constructive, I think that would be a great show, and Martin Kevorkian was probably one of my favorite folks that we've had on the program thus far. And that said, he is an admitted white supremacist.
Well, I guess we could debate with him. I'm still curious as to why none of the robots in iRobot had gold teeth. I'm still pondering that one, but we can debate that with him. I'd love to do that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's pretty.
Well, why would a blue-eyed robot have gold teeth?
True. You're right.
I wanted, if you all could share for our listeners, you all talk about how non-white males, black males, I think black males in particular, are consistently emasculated in a lot of mainstream films, and you point out a lot of different characters. I think I read one of your reports where you tracked for, I believe it was 2005, 2006, and 2007. Each of those years during Black History Month, a black male was emasculated in some way, shape, or form during Black History Month. Can you talk about that pattern and what problems you see with that?
Well, if we are going to delve into emasculation, obviously one, again, just to give a slight definition to that, in case that hasn't come up before, is that we talk about masculinity, and obviously that can be defined in a number of ways, but when we're talking about mainstream movies, what Hollywood has told us is that masculinity is defined by being a heterosexual male who either gets the girl or is on his way to getting the girl, to put it in chauvinistic terms, and that this masculinity is validated throughout the course of the movie. And being emasculated would make this character somehow less than masculine, either by making him feminine in some way, shape, or form, or thwarting him sexually, or some other aspect of that nature. Now, excuse me. And when we think about the movies that you're talking about in terms of Black History Month, you're talking about Big Mama's House 2, which we referenced earlier. You're talking about a Tyler Perry movie, and that was his first movie, actually, that was released widely, which was Diary of a Mad Black Woman. And we're also talking about referring to, at least just, and these are just Black History Month alone, also referring to, I know this one's going to get Frederick up out of his seat, but we're also talking about Norbit.
Okay.
Starring, if I can say that, Eddie Murphy. I think I should let Frederick take over from here because I know he's feeling this one.
Well, I mean, I think also when we talk about mainstream contemporary movies, what we do have to do is not rush past the past. And this emasculation trend is nothing new in that it actually harkens back to the era of enslavement, whereby it was actually a threat to have the biggest and blackest male, roaming around, feeling as if he could threaten the power structure. You're talking about, especially in a plantation-type setting, where you have perhaps fewer whites than black slaves. You have to somehow gain control and intimidate, the large mass. Now, in this type of situation, it was important to take, say, the biggest and the strongest and make an example of him, right? So that way, listen, if Big John, got the business, well, what am I going to do as far as resisting and trying to change the situation here? And so I think that when we look at images and as far as non-white males, black males in particular, is not uncommon to see not necessarily light-skinned black males, but particularly those brown, dark-skinned, chocolate, black males who are, when we say emasculated, it's not necessarily physically anything's done to them, although they can get killed off or, physically roughed up. But also, when we talk about, say, the utopic reversal, that's one of our 6 archetypes, whereby this character has authority, but in actuality, they're unable to actualize their authority. And so for some reason it's undercut or it's just undermined. And so, for example, look at Fantastic Four, where you have, again, a brown-skinned, dark-skinned black general played by Andre Braugher. He's a general, but yet when he's giving orders, Reed Richards is essentially able to tell him, I know what you said, but no, we're going to do it my way. And unfortunately, Andre Braugher ends up being obliterated at the end.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah, I mean, and we've seen this trend as far as emasculation, how it carries over to black males through this utopic reversal, because the utopic reversal is what I guess you could say a more nuanced New Age, version of the same concept behind, say lynching back in the day. And again, I'm not saying that blacks are being lynched on screen. I'm not saying that. But in terms of the idea of this power dynamic must be preserved. And even though you have your own business, you are a threat, and so therefore we're going to lynch you. I mean, a lot of people forget the fact that in addition to the rumors of, oh, you raped the right woman, okay, there were a lot of black businessmen who were lynched. Why? Because they represented a threat to the existing status quo. And again, when you talk about on the mainstream movie space, what we often focus on is, oh, well, look, in Armageddon, you had a black general. Oh, look, in iRobot, you had a black police chief. Oh, look, there's diversity. But in actuality, if we look back at these images and study in context, well, not even just study, just look in context, especially in comparison to the other white characters, we actually see that these characters don't have the power that they, in theory, are ascribed. And so in actuality, this becomes part of this emasculation pattern whereby, it's just best that the audience leave, not feeling perhaps threatened by this idea of black power on screen perhaps. Again, we don't know exactly what the reasons are or the reasoning behind these movie makers, but what we do know is what we end up seeing, just the final product. And again, the pattern is fairly solid with respect to how non-whites are essentially, at the end of the day, put in their place, especially in contrast to whites who are able to ascend, the power structure, manipulate and change the powers that be in order to execute their aims or desires. And that's what opens the door up to the white character patterns of which we call prototypes.
And it's important to think about, and I guess I'm going back on the promise that we made, because I am going to have to dip into black and white Because when we think about where Hollywood has come from and why this pattern of emasculation is so strong in mainstream movies, you need to look no further than the first mainstream movie ever made, and that's Birth of a Nation.
1950.
Right, and the context of Birth of a Nation is, and a widely successful movie, no less, the KKK, right, the KKK thwarting a black male. This is, again, actually a white male in blackface, but thwarting a black male who has been accused of raping a white woman. I know, I hate when that happens.
I'm chuckling because, again, context of white supremacy. Our pleasure to have Frederick Gooding and Khalid Patterson. Justice and Gus T. Renegade. No one has ever come on the program and asked, why is one of the hosts of this program named Gus T. Renegade? And bang, I could have pointed them right to D.W. Griffith's classic Birth of a Nation and said, look what happens to the black character, even though it's a white person in whiteface. Just pay attention to that character. You'll understand a lot about what's happening here on the cows. That movie, I would recommend non-white people check it out. White people have said this is landmark cinema, watershed moment in film. I wanted to play non-white adversary here before we move to the next topic in terms of what you all talked about in terms of the emasculation of non-white males. Tyler Perry had a film released again this year during Black History Month where there was a black person in a dress, black male in a dress. And I mean, just in terms of the consistency of seeing this, you all list a ton of non-white males that have been either made to wear a dress or engaging in some sort of homosexual behavior. Will Smith in 6 Degrees of Separation, Dwayne Johnson, Eddie Murphy we already talked about, Martin Lawrence, Chris Tucker, Wesley Snipes, even further back with Flip Wilson in the 70s, Richard Pryor. I don't think many people have seen The Toy. Richard Pryor is made to wear, and I mean, let's even back up. Richard Pryor is bought to be a toy for a white child, and before he can do that, he can't get a job, so he becomes a maid and wears a maid's dress to serve fried chicken for white people in Louisiana.
Well, Mr. Jefferson, sorry, you confused me. I thought you were recounting the storyline for Bringing Down the House.
Yeah, really?
What, right? Queen Latifah.
No, now I'm confused because I thought you mentioned Queen Latifah in Bringing Down the House. I thought you were mentioning Anthony Anderson playing a butler in Agent Cody Banks. But
wow!
I'm sorry.
A black male serving a white child. I thought you were talking about Shaquille O'Neal and Shazam.
Jeez, right. Well, I almost thought that you were talking about Man on Fire, where Denzel is essentially a peer with Dakota Fanning. But anyway, I'm sorry. You were saying, Mr. Jeff.
There's a long pattern of this sort of thing. I guess if I was going to play non-white adversary, this is just fun. These are just, it's just movies. What's the problem? There are white people that, put on a dress. I've seen that on Saturday Night Live and the Pat character. That happens a ton. Robin Williams did it. You all are just, you're making up stuff. You're making a big issue out of nothing. And you're being homophobic. What would your response be?
Well, I would respond, first of all, like any politician, I would deny. But to give you a real answer, for starters, if it's just a movie, well, I would agree, and maybe we can give the scenario to you, Mr. Jefferson. If it's just a movie, hey, why don't you take Pulp Fiction and take it to Justice's class? I know school's starting up, so just take Pulp Fiction and play it for the what I'm missing up the age, I'm sure, but play it for the 3rd grade class. And which grade did you say?
5th grade, likely.
Yeah, there you go. I'm so close. You can see I didn't study in school. Take it to the 5th grade class, 3rd grade too if you want to, and just start playing Pulp Fiction. And I want to see how quickly the parents and administrators and staff descend like flies and eject the DVD and then eject you from the school campus. And why? Well, because they would say that's inappropriate for that audience. Can't you see it's rated R? It's violent. It's got profanity, nudity. It's got all these images that could impact the minds of our youth. Well, okay, if that's the case, if the violence, profanity, and other content would impact me, well, why wouldn't the consistency of the racial images somehow have an impact?
Right. I mean, because you also could make the argument, Mr. Jefferson, hey, it's just a movie. This is fiction. If anything, I'm using this as an example to instruct the students on what not to do. And for some reason, just, like the flies descending, unlike the flies descending upon you, that argument probably would not fly. And in fact, that's the reason why we have the rating system by the MPAA, right? The idea is, listen, what we're trying to do is filter somehow the information, because when it comes to images of smoking, profanity, sexual themes, there is this belief that if people are exposed to them repeatedly, particularly at a certain age where they're unable to discern reality from fiction, right? The idea is that there will be a blurring of that line, and individuals will grow up having difficulty making determinations for themselves what is best, right? Now, obviously, we're all individuals and we have the right to choose, whether we, in fact, want to. Wait, you see, I'm talking the truth. You hear the sirens in the background. They're coming for me.
Be careful. They're coming for you, man.
No, okay, but I digress. But the point is that when it comes to racial imagery as well, I think that when it comes to the mainstream movie space, we see these movies, we see these images, and they're normal. And we're not saying that movies are the reason why we have every single racial incident, in America. We're not saying because of the movies Dr. Henry Louis Gates was arrested in his own home. We're not saying because of the movies that some, gentleman was shot 59 times in North Carolina, or because of the movies, they put out a little monkey baby doll toy out in Costco shelves. We're not saying because of the movies, but what we are saying is that they do reflect and reinforce mainstream society. And so when it comes to this idea of emasculation, again, I mean, a lot of it, is maybe a bit more, there's a spectrum. You have, those who wear dresses and are made to be effeminate, that which is considered to be against the norm in the mainstream space, at least as in contrast to our alpha white male, right, heterosexual, right, that's like the paradigm. But then, again, as we were saying earlier, when you talk about the utopic reversal, it's a bit more subtle. And the question is, well, listen, when Mr. Jefferson comes into the room and he's trying to address the crowd, are there just a group of people who just almost subconsciously are questioning your authority, questioning your power, not really respecting you, and not really knowing why they're reacting to you in that way, right? Because, again, it's cumulative, this effect. It's a period over years. They're talking about these individuals. I mean, everybody have been watching some of the same, that same Birth of a Nation movie made back in 1915 is still being shown at college campuses all across the nation today. It still
lives. It will continue to be shown.
Right. I mean, the Gone with the Wind was the most popular film in the UK last year, right? And that was made in 1939. And so these images are perpetual in their existence. And so over time, watching that one movie, that one television show, that one commercial, it's not just that one isolated incident. Of course, we can lambaste Norbit, for, what it was and what it represented, although it made $167 million. But the idea is, it's the cumulative effect of all these images combined, whereby it's almost like Total Recall, right, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, governor of California, whereby individuals have to strain to think, well, this image I have in my head, did I really see this, or was it fabricated for me?
Again, Khalid Patterson, Frederick Gooding, author, of You Mean There's Race in My Movie? Justice, you've been waiting patiently. Do you have questions you would like to ask?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Do you think Fiona or Shrek are white characters?
Who was the first character?
Fiona.
Oh, Fiona.
Uh-huh.
Well, technically, she is when in human form, right? I mean, right. I mean, it's just when ogre form when she and Shrek are happily married. But in human form, yes, she is a white character, and I think I don't know if you caught what we were saying over the break, but we had mentioned Donkey as a character who's in the movie, and I think what's interesting is that unlike the other characters in Shrek, Donkey is actually the donkey's name, right? He's not even personalized like Sammy or something of that nature,
Mm-hmm.
And so what's interesting, Justice, is that oftentimes when we see these animated movies, the overwhelming majority of the characters are white, right? In these animated movies, and that's what we're talking about. B movie and monsters v aliens. It's not uncommon for us to have our experience directed through the white perspective. You're about to say something.
In a movie like Shark Tale, which was led by a character voiced by Will Smith, the lead character, notice again how racial symbolism becomes an important part of what happens. The size of the lips and the references to, when Will Smith goes to, can I say shake a hand if it's a fish? I'm not sure what you call that, but there's a point in time where he tries to do some sort of handshake, if you will, and he states when the other character can't do it, I guess whitefish can't do it. So once again, even though we know these characters are purportedly race neutral, they're still voiced in large part by white actors, and when they're not, we see a change in the nature of these characters. And the classic reference, of course, is The Lion King, wherein, despite the fact that it's set in Africa, so...
Wait, is Africa a country? You say set in Africa.
Well, yeah, right. I'm still trying to determine where in Africa. Right, as you said, it is such a big country that I'm still trying to figure that one out. But even in that context that we see the important central characters predominantly played by white characters, the angel figure played by black characters exactly.
Oh, who happened to be a baboon, right? Or a monkey.
Correct. Right. Have you seen that before?
Did you see the teeth job? It is tight.
The teeth, once again, and recall the hyenas that were the villains, voiced by Whoopi Goldberg and Cheech Marin.
And also, if you notice, the hyena voiced by Whoopi Goldberg, the hyena in animated form does not have eyebrows, much like Whoopi Goldberg in real life. So clearly there's a connection being made. And I think one other aspect is, in addition to the voices, we have to think about, well, who's writing these scripts? And according to statistical evidence, the Writers Guild of America is over 90% white. The Directors Guild of America is over 98% white. So it's not an inflammatory statement. It's just a fact when we say that Hollywood is a white-dominated industry. And so when we have movies that come out like Tropic Thunder, whereby, going to that Birth of a Nation example, a white male essentially in what some might call blackface, you have to question, well, yes, it's all in the name of humor, but according to whose humor? Who's sitting around the table? Who has the power to decide what's funny? Apparently, it was a success because Robert Downey Jr. was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his role as Kirk Lazarus in that movie.
Okay, and did you say that Donkey was a non-white character?
That is, well, his teeth,
voiced by Eddie Murphy, who is a
right,
black male.
His teeth were white. Let's get that straight. But Donkey indeed was voiced by a non-white character.
And notice, if you're looking at storytelling, one of the things that you'll find, because our analysis not only looks at the surface level, but also looks, again, at movies. Movies are a product, much like an automobile. Mainstream movies are, at least, and they require certain elements in order to become mainstream. And if you look at story arcs, which is an important part of any good story, well, there's supposed to be some rise and fall and some character development. We've seen this all the time. I start off high, I go to my lowest point. By the end of the movie, I'm back on top again. And when you look at Donkey, his character arc, there is no arc. He's always permanent in his foolishness and buffoonery. Once again, much like a Jar Jar Binks, which, though technically not black, is once again voiced by a black actor.
Are we there yet?
Clearly we're not.
Oh.
Okay, and have you seen Cheetah Girls 2 at all?
Which movie is this?
The Cheetah Girls 2?
Well, unfortunately, I have not, sir.
I was going to say, unfortunately, I've missed that one. I'm going to put it on my Netflix right away. But can you describe, go ahead with your question, maybe describe the movie as well.
Okay, first I'll say my question. If so, if you did see the Cheetah Girls 2, what do you think about it in the cows?
Okay, how many main characters were there? Were there 3 or 4 or 5?
Let's see.
Was this a movie that was only on Disney, or was it in the movie theater?
I think it was in the movie theater and on Disney.
Well, how many non-white characters? How many non-white characters do you remember in the Cheetah Girls?
Three non-white characters and 1 white character.
Oh wow, okay. And so, what was the power relationship between the white character and the non-white characters? Like who was in charge? Who was in control?
I don't know because I suspect that it was Raven, which have you heard of Raven, like on Disney?
Raven-Symoné? Mm-hmm.
No, not Raven's mom, but just
Raven-Symoné.
yes, her. What she plays as Galleria, and I suspect that she thinks that she's the boss of the 3 of them. She makes the music. She makes everything.
Well, one of the interesting things, I have not seen the Cheetah Girls. My understanding is that it actually is a movie that is what we would call a made-for-TV movie, and that it made-for-TV, meaning that it actually airs on a TV channel, in this case Disney, and obviously Raven-Symoné has become widely popular on Disney Channel. One interesting thing to note, of course, is that when we think about made-for-TV and those sorts of movies, they have a different dynamic than mainstream movies. And without having seen the movie, unfortunately I can't speak to the images therein, but perhaps that is part of the point, the fact that if the cast is as diverse as you say, and there are non-white characters in control, I have to openly question whether or not that is part of the reason why it did not become a mainstream movie.
Yeah, I mean, because when you look at, have you seen an animated movie like The Incredibles, Justice?
Yes, I have.
Well, you know, The Incredibles was actually a very enjoyable movie. I saw it. I guess the question is, well, hey, why not make a movie like that whereby the family looks like people like in your family? I mean, the same storyline. They're still under attack. They're still trying to save the world. The question is, why are movie studios afraid of making these types of movies? And our answer is they believe if they alter the formula that we talked about earlier, whereby white characters are typically central to the storyline because that attracts the most amount of people to the theaters. If they deviate from that, they're concerned that their movies won't make as much money. And it's unfortunate because what's interesting when we talk about diversity and being tolerant, it's actually you and as a non-white person who's very tolerant. I mean, you learn to deal with people like yourself and other people who don't look like you and still accept it and still deal with it and even enjoy it. But what's interesting is that when you look at white America, as far as the mainstream is concerned, they have the ability to pick and choose. Every Friday night every weekend at the movie theater, Justice, white people are guaranteed in choosing a movie that has someone who looks like them star in the movie. Guaranteed. Every single weekend of the year. Now again, more movies now are made featuring more minorities than at any other point in time. We understand this and we applaud this. But just because there's been an increase in the quantity of minority images, that does not necessarily mean that there has been a corresponding increase in the quality of these minority images. And so if I go to the theater this weekend, I'm not necessarily guaranteed I'm going to see somebody who looks like me or who's just non-white. And if I do, the fact that they'll play a prominent role, meaning that they'll be the star, they'll be in control, that they'll save the world at the end. And the idea is, okay, not that I necessarily have to, but wouldn't it be nice?
Okay.
Do you have any more questions, Justice?
Yes, I have.
Right.
When you say system of marginalization, I think that's what you said, do you mean the system of white supremacy?
When we refer to, and you're using these big words, I thought that we had a rule that we weren't going to use these multi-syllabic words. I'm having trouble pronouncing them myself. When we talk about marginalization, white supremacy has a particular connotation in the context of American history. And we're free to debate that, certainly. And perhaps it's semantics, perhaps perhaps it's reality. But when we talk about marginalization, what we talk about is what ultimately is a systemic differentiation between white characters and non-white characters. And this pattern, the reason why we use the term marginalization is that this is not necessarily always born out of a negative approach. In other words, if you look at the angel archetype in a movie like, let's say, Bruce Almighty, where Morgan Freeman is helping Jim Carrey, well, technically speaking, that's a... Bruce Almighty? Bruce Almighty starred Jim Carrey and Morgan Freeman, and Jim Carrey is a news reporter that doesn't get a promotion, and Morgan Freeman, in this case, literally plays God. And he helps Jim Carrey by endowing or giving Jim Carrey his powers as God and allows him to essentially become God for a period of time and learn from the dangers of having that much power. And in the end, as in all movies featuring an angel that's a non-white character, Jim Carrey, who's white, ends up achieving a catharsis, or meaning, when I say catharsis, meaning that he ends up in a better place than where he started, and ultimately ends up in a relationship with Jennifer Aniston, gets a promotion, and becomes the hero of the movie. So when we think about marginalization, while there's nothing that's inherently negative or, dare we say, racist in terms of and being antagonistic towards Morgan Freeman, we just don't have evidence of that. Yet what we do see is that there is a repeated use of minority characters in the margins, as we would call. In other words, we are going to put you around the center, but we're not going to put you in the center. And there are some that may do that out of antagonism, but there are also others that may do that simply because that's all they've known in the hundreds of years, in the 100-year history of watching Hollywood movies. And just to give you a final example of that, have you heard of the term gypped? Say he gypped me? Now, anybody that...
Did you say gypped?
Yes.
Or chipped?
Gypped, as in somebody got a raw deal.
Oh, do you mean like with the J?
Well,
like
sure. It's
actually
with a G, and the term comes from
gypped,
as in somebody cheated me out of a deal.
No, I haven't.
Well, that's probably a good thing. It's actually a derogatory term, but many people don't know that, and many people use it all the time. And so, that being said, that the idea is that it's not necessarily always that these pattern of marginalization comes out of a place of antagonism, but sometimes this is just basically the replication of what has been reflected and reinforced in mainstream movies and mainstream media.
Okay.
Well said.
All right. Go ahead.
Thank you, Justice.
Do you have any more questions, Justice?
Not right now, but I will think of some more.
Okay. Wanted to get one more in. I know you all said you would be willing to do for an hour, so I don't want to hold you beyond your time limit, especially since I want to have you back on the program with Professor Kevorkian. I think that would be incredible. That one I would probably have to beg for 2 hours, though, because I'm sure that would be just too much information for 1 hour. So before I let you guys get out of here, I wanted to ask, because you all did go to the White Privilege Conference, can you share with our listeners your experience there? I know I read where you said you were not surprised to find out that it seemed like more white people had purchased your book and were familiar with your work. Can you share with our listeners what you experienced at the White Privilege Conference?
Well, I'll maybe jump in before Frederick closes. I believe that one of the reasons why at the White Privilege Conference why there are many white people that are receptive to our presentation is that this is something that inherently they understand and know and see all the time, and that ultimately what we're doing is giving them a language and a structure to understand that which they largely already know.
Yeah, and I think that what we do is we really just speak directly to the issue, no double speak. And what's interesting is that although for those of you out there listening who may just be beginning to partake in these conversations, it may feel a little awkward, right? In addressing these topics at times. But the idea is actually the best strategy is to engage, and speaking the truth directly and as swiftly as possible. I mean, now again, the media oftentimes frames these interactions as volatile and people shouting and yelling, but in actuality, when we go to, say, a white privilege conference or the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity in Higher Education or what have you, the idea is that in speaking directly to the point and standing firm based upon our research, right? Because again, I mean, this is not our opinion, but these are factual observations as established over decades, right? I think what it does is it really promotes a very healthy and substantive conversation whereby individuals tell us, you know what, I saw it, but I never saw it before. And so it's just a matter of us being able to direct the focus where people knew all along. Because when it comes to these issues of, say, racial discrimination or whatever have you, most people intuitively know. Most people get it. And that's why I think that it's just a matter of allowing people the space to admit, okay, we do have a pattern here at place. I mean, because everyone's always so quick to try to again, rush past the past. Well, Obama's in office, so I guess that about does it, right? I mean, any more questions? Let's move on. I mean, back, if you can remember to when we did deal with racism, as in what, like October of last year. I mean, you can think way back then. The idea is that, hey, we still have issues, and that's the reason why after Obama was elected, you have him referred to as a monkey in a New York Post cartoon. You have Michelle Obama told to visit her her primate relatives, and also you have Obama's face depicted as Curious George, the monkey cartoon on T-shirts and sold. And, not to mention just in general, you have a professor of African-American studies at one of our nation's premier institutions. I mean, Harvard was established before the country was established, and yet he's arrested in his own home for disorderly conduct, right? Yep. And that whole conversation, and really how that conversation did not evolve as far as what was going through the officer's mind when he decided this 59-year-old man with a limp is a threat to me, and therefore I must actually place handcuffs on him and book him. And think about the image, right, of him, outside his home in cuffs, looking startled, the mugshot. Those images are probably more damaging and probably more far-reaching than maybe any of his research. I mean, so many people have not even actually read his research and what he says about the topic, but they know the mugshot, they heard about the story and the fact that they had a beer and laughed about it. Or let's not even forget, before I check out here, that on the 1st of January of this year, a gentleman by the name of Oscar Grant, after celebrating the New Year, was out with a group of friends, was part of a suspected melee on the Bay Area Rapid Transit, or BART train in the San Francisco-Oakland area, and as a result of this disturbance, was handcuffed, was lying down on his stomach on the ground, and was shot and killed. Unarmed. And I beg all of your listeners to look up Oscar Grant. I mean, put it in YouTube, look it up. But more importantly, not to see the ghoulish footage, but just to see, well, what's the story? I mean, can anyone tell me, in terms of media is concerned, what has been reported? I mean, where's the officer now who did it? What's the status? What are the ramifications? So in other words, these type of things are happening. I'm not saying that they're necessarily the norm as far as every day, but let's not turn a blind eye as to what's happening. What we do know is that on a weekly basis at our local movie theater, we do see a lot of the same patterns and a lot of these same images in terms of when you look at the Oscar Grants or the Dr. Gates, the thread that's common with these stories is imagery, right? And in terms of what it is that I perceive, I perceive this black male as a threat, and so therefore I must subdue it. Why? Well, I really haven't seen that much that counterbalances that. I mean, it's not as if I'm accustomed to black experts on my television telling me what's going on. I never really had a black professor growing up, et cetera, et cetera. And so when we talk about image creation, it's all very much related, and that's why we have taken so much time to research the 6 archetypes. And also, some of your listeners might be curious to know that there are also, yes, there is a white elephant in my room, and they're called white prototypes. There are also 6 established patterns whereby whites are glamorized, right? We talk about minorities if and when they appear, according to the harm theory, are marginalized, where whites typically are glamorized in their appearance, right? And this is also very consistent because, Mr. Jefferson, I don't know how it is in the Seattle area, but at least where we are, we really strain to find individuals who look like Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie walking the streets, right?
I'm still looking for them.
Size 1, fit, trim, fit. I mean, the people that I see on a daily basis look nothing like that. In fact, that's part of the reason why we pay these individuals $20 million a pop, to work out with a trainer 6 hours a day and have that chef and look a certain way, because it's the fabrication and creation of an image that is sold worldwide. Worldwide is where we first started off. And so, again, I mean, we're very thankful that the cows opened up this space to host us. We look forward to a return trip and hopefully, we can continue this dialogue. And in the meantime, if anybody is curious, they can find us on the web at minorityreporter.com or follow us. We're Twitter compliant as far as mallet men. We're even Facebook compliant. But again, I mean, we also are very much interested in this debate. I mean, we don't guarantee that all of the listeners are going to agree with this, but we do guarantee that after enduring the Minority Reporter experience, you will never see movies the same way again.
Can you please tell us the website where people can get your products one more time, please?
Sure, that is minorityreporter.com, all one word. And before we sign off, Mr. Jefferson, I just want to make sure that we didn't leave any stone unturned. I mean, you had indicated earlier, maybe, not pulling the full trigger on this, but seriously, is there any burning question, I mean, that you would like to share with us so we can make sure that we address adequately your listeners' concerns?
I think my co-host had one. Justice, did you have a question?
Yeah, what's your website list again? What's your website?
Oh, sure. It's www.minorityreporter.com. And again, I really want to urge caution.
Did you say
anyone who you said yes, Minority Reporter. MINORITYREPORTER. And I was just a word to the wise. I really urge caution, because once you enter into that portal, much like Captain Leo Davison, as played by Mark Wahlberg in Planet of the Apes, once you go through that portal, you'll be transported to a new dimension where, again, you will simply never see movies the same way again. I mean, we do not claim any liability.
I generally, on my program, I enjoy talking to white people, even admitted racists, because, as you said, they already know about this topic, racism, white supremacy, and I have concluded that white people are way more informed about racism, white supremacy than non-white people. So generally, I love having white people because I feel like I can challenge them, and at worst, it'll be conflict between a non-white person and a white person. That's what it should be anyway. I generally go much easier with non-white people just because I don't like having conflict with non-white people. But your work, fabulous. I'm a big fan. I definitely want you back on the program. If you're giving me one before you go, what I generally point to in terms of evidence that non-white people are very confused about the system of racism, white supremacy, I point to Oscar Knight, Halle Berry, and Denzel Washington, but especially Halle Berry being awarded an Academy Award for her performance in Monsters Ball. If non-white people had even a minimum level of understanding about racism, white supremacy, I think there would have been total disgust with her receiving that award, that film, everything about it. Even a non-white person crying and being happy to be awarded for their performance in that particular film. How do you feel about that?
Well, as you probably already know, and for our listeners out there, one of the things that we make reference to in our book, You Mean There's Race in My Movie, is the fact that what a lot of people don't know is that Angela Bassett was actually the person that they had originally, the producers had been originally looking to have her slotted in to that role. And she turned the role down based upon the nature of the role, and is quoted as saying, "I wasn't going to be a prostitute on film. I couldn't do that because it's such a stereotype about black women and sexuality." And she, right, and she's right on target there. And not only that, but to refer back to what we talked about earlier in this conversation, the emasculation of the black male, often overlooked, is that P. Diddy, again, rapper, not classically trained actor, is executed unceremoniously early in the film.
Right? Wait, I'm sorry, real quick. When you say rapper, let's not belittle him too much in that he is an impresario who, although he didn't necessarily finish his college degree, has obviously played the capitalism game well and amassing millions of dollars and employs other people. So in other words, regardless of how you feel about his product, he's made money. He succeeded at this game. And so when you take this quote-unquote black great within the black community, right, within black circles, he's quote-unquote achieved it, made it. And all you do is reduce him to this bit role whereby we don't know the context of why he's in jail on death row, and he's summarily executed. The black guy dies first within the first 5 minutes. Well, that fits another pattern as well. Proceed.
Right, and that's the emasculation. And if you think about Halle Berry, when we talk about the pivotal scene in the movie, I can't even call it a romantic scene. I mean, if we look at the graphic nature of the sex scene that was in the movie, it's not akin to virtually any other love scene as it was purported to be. It's not equivalent to any other love scene that we would see featuring a mainstream, prominent white actress at that particular point in her career. And when we look at what happens to Halle Berry's child, again, dark, overweight, child removed, killed, off-screen, unceremoniously, only to then have Halle Berry end up in the arms not of a robust, young, youthful, let's say a Brad Pitt type character, but of a Billy Bob Thornton, right? An old, crusty. I mean, I'm going to go there. I mean, this guy is not attractive by any stretch of the imagination. So not only are we taking down P. Diddy, but also belittling the quality of a Halle Berry. In other words, we're going to take your icon, i.e. as in black community in this case, and we're going to reduce her to an exploited prostitute who ultimately ends up in the arms of this nondescript white male that actually killed her previous counterpart in P. Diddy here. So when we think about that movie, we think about Denzel winning the same time for his role where he's also emasculated and also dies at the end of that movie, we really start to see how this is where it becomes difficult. And this is why I think it's important for all of us when we think about being non-white, in this case black, that we ultimately do need to challenge each other to be more critical of the roles that we take and the role that we take in this Hollywood mainstream movie space. Because ultimately, what the Minority Reporter aims to do is evolve our language not by ignoring or glossing over or by patting our colleagues on the back with an NAACP Image Award, but to come up with a language that elevates this discussion, gives it a common language, and allows us to be critical without taking down individuals. In other words, we're being critical of the structure of the Hollywood system, not necessarily of the individuals, but again, not excusing them from criticism. And I think that's where the Minority Reporter has come from, and that's where it will continue to go, and that's why our presentations are so important. And if you're out there and you're looking for a new way to talk about diversity, a new way to engage a youthful audience, that is why you need to bring the TMR experience to your campus, your school, or business. And you can always reach us at the website. Again, you can reach us at editor@minorityreporter.com. If you're on email, you can text us at 202-288-5562. Please get in touch with us so we can keep this conversation going.
And Mr. Jefferson, if I could just conclude with one last anecdote. In referencing Halle Berry and her role in Monsters Ball, winning the Best Actress Award at the Academy Awards for her role in Monsters Ball, what's interesting is that it's like a club. And so now that she won, you see how she instantly was vaulted into the mainstream spotlight, even more so. And you see the trajectory of her career as compared to Angela Bassett's, right, from that point on. But
have
my
you
real
seen her?
Yeah, well, tell me, have you seen her? And so my real point is that now that she won the Best Actress Award, she is invited back the following year to present for the Best Male Actor Award. Apparently it's a little tradition they have, whereby the Best Actor and the Best Actress return the following year to present for the opposite sex. So the year in which she presented for the Best Actor Award, none other than Adrian Brody of The Pianist won, and as he steps up on stage, I don't know if you saw this, but he actually grabs her and turns her over to kiss her a la Fred Astaire. One minor detail to recall is that she was actually married at the time to the R&B great Eric Benet. Now, I really strained to play the substitution game whereby Wesley Snipes, upon returning from his hiatus with his tax issues, receives the Best Actor Award for 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue Part 2. And as he goes up to accept the Best Actor Award, he swoops up Catherine Zeta-Jones in his arm, plants one on the lips, and while Michael Douglas looks smugly on from the audience. I don't know if Wesley will make it down stage if he does something like that. But what I'm saying is that you look at Monsters Ball and Halle Berry's sexuality and how it was treated, or or lack thereof, as far as being respected. You see how Adrian Brody, when questioned afterwards, was asked, well, why did you do that? Why did you kiss her like that? And he said, you know what? I saw the moment. I saw I had a chance. And just got to go for it. Well, for all you listeners out there, I don't know if that's sound advice the next time you see that hot babe out there who happens to have that wedding ring in her finger and her husband's right next to her, right? I don't know if that's going to work for you if you give that explanation. But that's the explanation he gave, and his career has continued without any repercussion per se. But I guess the question is, and again, it's not to say that it's because he saw Monsters Ball that he somehow processed that I can do this. But to what degree is it a factor, right, as far as her sexuality? I mean, you've seen it in Swordfish, how it was respected or lack thereof, et cetera. Die Another Day, her sexuality, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is, we know it's just a movie, but to what degree do we see how it blurs over into this reality?
Outstanding. I am a big fan. As I said, I was impressed immediately when I opened the book and looked at the first page. Real honor to have both of you on the program, and I'm going to be working immediately to see if I can get Dr. Kevorkian to hop on a program with you all. I think that would be incredible because you all have, it would be an incredible program. I want to have you back anyway. Thank both of you. Again, minorityreporter.com. Mr. Frederick Gooding and Khalid Patterson. Phenomenal to hear from both of you today.
Thank you very much. May you never see movies the same way again.
Thank you. Context of White Supremacy.
Thank you.
Justice
Take
and
care.
Gus T. Renegade. I'm going to wrap this one. Justice, do you have a thought that you'd like to get in before we close out?
Yes, that was a great show. I really hope that they can come on again.
Me too.
I would like to get some more information about movies.
Me
and
too.
I have some more questions, but I know I have to go. So
Yeah,
I hope they just come on again.
Well, you can always
too.
email us.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Okay.
Their email address, if you go to minorityreporter.com, their contact information is there. So there you go. If you're listening, or Justice, you can shoot them an email and ask questions or what have you, or just thank them for coming on the program today. I am incredibly grateful. Thank the both of you. Phenomenal work with the book, the DVD, and the website. And, yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to speaking with both of you again real soon.
All righty. And remember, Lady Justice, do not remain blind. Keep those eyes open and keep watching what you're watching.
Okay.
Peace.
Outstanding. Thank you, Frederick Gooding and Khalid Patterson. Phenomenal program. I am tired. Going to rest. We've done a lot of shows. Take a little break. The cows will be back. Thank everybody for tuning in. I think that was a great program. We will be back. Thank you, Justice and Gus T. Renegade. Signing off. You have anything you want to say before we close out?
Yes. Before the show for the non-white people, what are we going to do about that?
I'm sorry?
For the shows for me, you, and some other folks.
Oh, yeah.
For the non-white.
Mm. Oh, that's right. You'll have to, I have to get you once we get off the program to talk about that because we are supposed to schedule that show. Yeah, I'll get you once we get off the show so we can schedule that because that is coming up. That'll be our next show. Yeah, that'll be our next show. I'll talk to you as soon as we get off the show.
Okay.
Outstanding. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Context of White Supremacy. Sorry we didn't get callers for this one, but I knew they were not going to stay for the full show. We'll get you next time. Justice, Gus T. Renegade, replace white supremacy with justice. Thank you.